This is Vibe Science, a top 100 wellness podcast presented by the Radcast Network, breaking wellness barriers and making health truly personal. Here are your hosts, Ryan Alford and Chris Hansen.
Hello, and welcome to Vibe Science. We're always about going to your highest vibe. It's about mind, body, and energy. I think, this next guest makes a lot of sense. I'll just say my co-host, Chris Hansen, has been in my ear for 3 years, telling me about his product. Little did we know we'd end up having him on the show about how wonderful it is. He is a neuroscientist. He's the chief medical officer at Apollo Neuroscience, Dr. Dave Rabin. What's up, Dave?
What's up, Ryan? Hi, Chris. Thanks so much for having me.
Yes. Apollo Neuro. I don't know how many times you get on the show and you get to hear these accolades, Dr. Dave, probably a lot now because your product's getting out there, but your biggest advocate is officially here. Chris has been telling me forever. And then when I got my hands on it, I see why, because I'm always the skeptic of the two. We're kind of like, we both believe in the same things, but I'm kind of, Chris is kind of the lover. I'm the skeptic sometimes, like, I don't know. I got to try it. But
got to be skeptical. It's important. It's important to be skeptical.
Yeah. Yes. But how are you, Dr. Dave?
Good.
What's
busy?
Yeah.
Life is busy.
Life is busy.
We're creating technology that's really like healing humanity, and we're studying how psychedelics work, and we're, exploring consciousness in mental health. And this is the most exciting time to be working in our field ever. And there's faster change than ever. So it's a really, fantastic time to be working in this space.
It is. And I know we're going to get down it. It seems like we're making some real steps in people opening their minds in a lot of ways to things, techniques, modalities, and different things. Unfortunately, we seem to take 3 steps forward and 4 back. Sometimes we'll get to that here shortly, but let's set the table for our audience, Dr. Rabin, and you give a little bit of maybe the Cliff's Notes of your background and everything leading up to Apollo, and then we'll go down a few other lanes.
Sure. And I think it's so funny that the resonance between, what you guys are doing and on this show and Apollo, because Apollo is literally technology that delivers soothing vibrations, good vibrations to your body to raise your vibe, right? That's
exactly.
The whole point.
Literally.
So we're aligned in that mission.
Yes.
And this really started for me when I was working with patients with severe PTSD and traumatic brain injuries, and a lot of veterans, military veterans, who were really struggling. And we just didn't have good treatments for them. And when you really started to look at the data, it became very clear, this is going back to 2012 for me, it became very clear even at that point that we knew that the evidence was pointing to the medications that we had available, like Paxil and Zoloft for PTSD, were only working in maybe 30% of people long-term. And everybody else, all the other 70%, were continuing to struggle daily with symptoms of PTSD. And that just stood out to me as a really, really bad statistic for Western medicine. We are really doing a crappy job. We're only hitting 30% successfully, and everybody else has side effects and symptoms, right? Come on. So this is an area that's ripe for improvement.
Yes.
And I had been studying chronic stress for quite a long time at that point, and just been really interested in the impact of stress on the body and how it, in some people, improves performance clearly, right? Look at some of the most incredible performers in the world, the Michael Jordans and all the incredible elite athletes of the world, and Simone Biles, right? These people have faced incredible challenges, and yet they have achieved a level of human performance that is just exquisite. And then we have the complete opposite end of the spectrum where people develop mental illness, right?
Yeah.
So what's the difference? And why do certain people trend towards one direction or another? And so that's been a big focus of my research. And it's just been the way that we treat these people can be improved dramatically. And so that starts to lead you to things that actually work, like soothing touch and soothing music and natural techniques, the smell of your mom's chicken soup, right? Like getting a hug from a loved one or a pet. All of these things naturally improve feeling safe in the body. And that helps people to feel safe enough to heal. Healing requires safety. If your body thinks you're running from a lion, you're not going to be able to turn on healing response, right? All your blood's going to your muscles and heart and stuff. So yeah, so that's kind of the idea. And so that led into the development of Apollo, which is using the soothing touch, the science of soothing touch, to deliver safety signals to the body that help us to feel calm and in control at any time, which is a skill that all humans have. Like neuroscience has shown, we can all be calm and in control at any moment. Any moment. It's possible if we practice doing it and understand how to do it, right? So Apollo was really an effort of using the neuroscience of this attention and touch and calming in the vagus nerve system to activate the recovery response and help people feel safe in their own bodies, which is also kind of how MDMA works as well, molecularly, which is another part of my research. So that's kind of tying it together for you.
Dr. Rabin, we're going to get to the nitty gritty of the product that touched all that. And I know Chris probably I want to tee him up for, asking you a few things, but I like to know what drives people. What made you so interested in this? Like what usually there's, nature or nurture, there's been, maybe you're born to be this, but like something probably impacted you that made you passionate about this. If I would assume.
Yeah. I mean, there's different parts of it that I'm really passionate about, like on one hand, growing up as a kid who had very vivid dreams, I was really fascinated by what dreams were and that they felt so real that to me, I would be finding myself as a kid, like referencing a conversation with my brother in real life, but he was actually Dream Richard. Right. So he had no idea what I was talking about because it happened in my dream, but I remembered it as real. And that was pretty wild. So as I started to notice that other people also had those experiences as well, it became an area of real fascination for me, because my parents would always say, who are very, very, my parents are both physicians and have done research before in the past. And so they're very thoughtful and critical minded about these things, but they didn't want me to be afraid of nightmares. So they just said dreams aren't real. And I kept having them and they kept feeling real. And they told me what the word real meant. And they told me that dreams aren't that, but they feel it. So there's something going on here where maybe we don't understand what real is, right? Maybe there's more. Maybe there's more to this. Yeah. And I was probably about 7 when I first had that thought about that word, where I was like confused about what the word real meant because of this contradiction between what I was feeling in my body and what the respected authorities were saying. Right. So from there, that became like a major focus of my attention. And then I started learning, like reading about sci-fi and neuroscience. And as I got older into like, end of like early college and that kind of thing. And and then found mental health, because mental health is, I've always kind of had a passion for like preventing injustice, stopping injustice, like as somebody who I feel like my parents always did a lot of good for the community and like providing healthcare to people who couldn't afford it, who really needed it. And one thing that was always passed down to me was that everybody deserves the right to heal. No matter who you are, no matter what your background, no matter what you've done, you deserve the right to heal. If you've done something really, really bad, it's a crime, you can be prosecuted for that after you get the opportunity for emergency healing. And that's like the Hippocratic principle of medicine. And it is aligned with like these ancient Eastern principles and tribal principles of medicine, that everybody deserves the right to heal. And so for me, having parents who also practiced medicine in a way where they were modeling giving people who couldn't pay access to healing that was very, very costly at their own expense, and doing it a lot, really, created a great model for me to feel like that was part of like a duty of being a human, and especially a duty as being a doctor. And so, mental health became fascinating to me because a lot of it is meaning related, and stress impacts it so much. And it seems to be where a lot of these things overlap, but you get these devastating consequences if they overlap the wrong way. And then people don't get better for a long time because we're just treating the symptoms. We're not actually treating the source of the illness and getting to the heart of that with people, which is what a lot of the more modern tools are helping to do. And so seeing the opportunity there with so many people who weren't getting better in the current Western model, even though it does work for some people, it just doesn't work for a lot of people, too many people. That to me was like, okay, these people deserve healing. Let's see if neuroscience has already shown how we should be treating them. Right? Like if science, like maybe the problem is in translation from the research to the clinic, which I also noticed being a clinician scientist over the time of my training and practice, that there are huge gaps between what the researchers are doing and what the doctors are doing. Right. And so I tried to, like, as I started to learn within the system of academic medicine, I learned so much, but I also, especially like, what are the gaps in the system that prevent the effective translation of these billions of dollars of worth of discoveries over the last 100 years into actual practical tools and treatments for people that don't have them today. And I just refuse to believe that with all of that research we've been doing and everything I was reading, that we don't have more answers to these questions on the clinical side, because the clinical side is just, how do we make people feel better? That is a lot easier than like, how does a specific component in this cell work with this drug? Right? Those are very different, different levels of complexity questions. How do we make somebody feel better has a lot of nuance, but it's also a lot easier to answer in general. And neuroscience now today has shown how we can do that with lots of different technologies, plant medicine, supplements, behavioral techniques, cognitive techniques, breathing techniques, meditation, yoga, mindfulness, vibration, sound, light. All of it is understood already. We know how it works. So that became for me like my passion, driving my passion of like consciousness and meaning with helping people who deserved healing, who weren't getting it. I was like, let's work on translating what we have learned over the years into tools and treatments that people can use. And Apollo became the very first of that we launched in 2020.
That is the most thoughtful response to that question we've ever gotten. Because I ask that question a lot, because I like to get under people's hood a little bit to know how they tick or what makes them think. And at the same time,
it's a big question.
it really crystallized for me. And you said at the beginning, like, the vibrations and vibe science. What you just described is exactly why we have this show. Yeah. It's because modern medicine treats a lot of symptoms, and then holistic medicine sometimes gets too woo-woo. And Chris and I are not kind of woo-woo guys. We're executives, we're workout, we're hard pushers, like, moving fast. But we know we've got to get to the source of making people truly healthy. And you said it, that's a key word. The number one word of everything you just said is getting to the source of the issues and solving things, and not just treating symptoms or parts and pieces of it. So, amen, hallelujah. From a Southern guy in a Southern church, you get the deacons in the back. They'd go, amen, hallelujah, praise the Lord. When the pastor would say something good.
I love it.
You got the pulpit there. So I really love that, Dr. Rabin. And, I'll say this. I've been in marketing for 20 plus years and have done a lot of it. And interpretation of data and the misalignment, that really hit home for me too, as kind of a guy that's seen that happen. You can make data certain. I can go look at a study sometimes or look at the data and then I go over here and I look at what the output was. I'm like, wait, well, and I don't know that mine's right or theirs right, but I'm like, I'm not sure we connected these dots. And it sounds like you see that a lot yourself.
Oh yeah, all the time. because people are so siloed, like people are so, I think in a lot of ways, people are more disconnected from each other now than they have been in a long time, which is strange to say because in a lot of, on the surface, people feel more connected through social media and all these things, but we're more disconnected from each other in like the authentic human way of community and being around each other, being around those that are similar to us and like-minded, and also making sure that we have time to be around people who are different. And that diversity and the enrichment of community is kind of lost right now. And a lot of it is, there's a lot of reasons for that, right? Social media itself is part of the problem. Politics and division is a problem, right? And creating like reasons for people to hate each other. Like, why do we need more reasons for people to hate each other? That's like a crime against humanity, right? Like, even if you're doing it subtly as a form of politics, like, why are we okay with our public servants that we technically elect that are supposed to represent us and support us as a community? Why are we okay with them inciting, even subtly inciting division between people? Like, we need unification now more than ever. And there are parties that are making money by manipulating the government to divide people. Like, what? Yeah. Right? Loneliness is the biggest problem in the entire health community. Public health wise, loneliness is probably like one of the single biggest public health problems that is easily solvable with $0 by just bringing people to creating reasons for people to come together.
Yeah.
Right? $0.
And it's happening on both sides. The whole system's broken, it's just,
but it's solvable. But it's solvable.
Totally solvable.
Right? It just needs to be the people, the things that are happening that are like blocking it from just doing what it's supposed to do need to kind of stop. Right. Yeah. And then if we it's just like with ourselves, right? The problems within ourselves are always like as above, so below. Right. Like when we realize that we're like in our own way a lot of the time, all of a sudden we get out of our way. We stop overthinking things. We get more in the moment. And our body just does what it's supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Chris, I'll let you jump in here. I know you've been using Apollo for quite a bit. So questions for Dr. Rabin.
First off, I just want to say what you said about filling the gap. That's what I feel like this is filling the gap between modern medicine and the holistic, right? The woo-woo, because in my experience, I own a medical testing laboratory. I work with doctors all over the country. I'm sitting in those waiting rooms with these people. I see people suffering, whether it's a psychiatry clinic, a pain management clinic. The only solution is writing scripts a lot of the time, unfortunately. You don't see people, like you said, sitting down with a physician and actually feeling safe and getting to the root of the problem. And I don't even blame our physicians because, like you said, there's a gap of knowledge from the clinic or from the research to the clinic. And that's what I found to be true. And that's part of the reason me and Ryan got into this was like, I'm watching these pain management, these psych offices, and I'm like, is anyone actually healing? And even my own experience, I've been on antidepressants, SSRIs. I'm confident saying it didn't really work for me. I was one of that 70%. And like you, the veteran community, it really inspired me, and seeing those guys suffer, and a lot of those guys moving towards the alternative techniques, right? The psychedelics, the ayahuasca, the ibogaine. And that's what opened my mind really to the psychedelic world, which then in turn got me into Apollo. I think it was, right before, maybe right after I went down to do some plant medicine, and that expanded my mind. And then all of a sudden Apollo just clicked. I'm like, okay, energy, frequency, that's everything. Why wouldn't this work? Right. So, and like I was saying pre-show to anyone listening, I started the Apollo pretty early on when I quit drinking and was trying to make some big changes in my life. And obviously I was using alcohol to change my emotions, change my feelings, my vibration. So I remember the first instances the Apollo really was clutch for me was socializing, networking, entertaining clients, still having to go out with doctors and take them to dinners and that whole deal, and not having that liquid, courage to bump up that networking, those 2-3 drinks. And it was one of those things, I'd pop it on like 10 minutes before I'd walk into a dinner, and then I wouldn't think about it. Next thing you know, I'm driving home and I'm like, all right, that was solid. And it almost gave me that confidence to get through the first couple times. And now it's just, right. And exactly the social vibe setting, everyone. Social is literally a setting on this thing.
That's what I'm on right now.
Yeah. Oh, and that's where I'm like, just set it and forget it, or use the smart vibe feature where all day it's whatever you set it to, it'll calm or energy or whatever. But I was a skeptic of all this type of stuff. And I've even had people comment, that's a scam. And I'm like, dude, you need your Vibrates, bro. You're probably the perfect candidate for this device.
Yeah.
It blows my mind how skeptical, and we all are, right? We default to negative of skepticism instead of just being open to trying something new. And I think we're really entering a time in history. People are open to it and they're looking for healing and they're open to try new things because, like you said, the loneliness, the isolation, and even down here, that sense of community, I can see whether it's the run clubs or yoga meetups, people are really putting themselves back out there and craving that connection. And like what you said about the division, I think of that all the time where if I'm at the run club with 100 people, I don't give a shit what your politics are. We're all here running, bonding, enjoying each other, celebrating, the completion, like that feeling of completing something with a group together in unity is so powerful. And I think about this in the gym. When I'm getting a workout in with like a group of dudes, and then when you finish, that feeling after of like, we accomplished something together, like that might be the best drug on earth. And I think this all the time as men after high school, college, and say you get out of athletics, where do we find that community anymore? It's easy when you're in school, but when you're out in the real world, you have to really put in action to plug in with people and find that group of people you mesh with. But I think when you leave school, you don't have all the clubs and the sports and stuff to kind of keep you immersed with community. And now I feel like we're entering this time where we need it more than ever, man. We need to get back to simple, back to just, what do we crave? Like you said, safety, community, camaraderie, touch. I'm off my soapbox now.
Yeah, you're spot on with the sports, by the way, the team sports. I mean, that's one of the things I can personally attest to. I miss more than anything else in my life that I lost as I was like coming out of, college and even, med school. We still had athletics and teams and people to play with, but then as you get out of academic training and you're in the real world, it takes a lot more effort to find the people to have those athletic experiences with in the same way. And it's a loss. And so you have to then put that much more effort into prioritizing it. But it's so important to get that feeling, because that feeling is like the natural high that you get from accomplishment and growth and getting stronger and all the things, the dopamine, the serotonin, and the norepinephrine, and the endorphins and the opiates and all of the good stuff is coming out from these experiences. Even probably endocannabinoids get released, right, to help like our body's natural cannabinoids. All the good stuff comes out. That's why you feel so good when we have those experiences post yoga or post exercise especially with a group. It's even better. So there's a real effect. You're basically inducing a drug, like a psychedelic drug like effect in your own brain at will. And turns out there's lots of ways to do it, which is pretty cool.
That's awesome. Dr. Rabin, let me ask you a question, kind of getting us channeled in on like some of the more recent stuff you've been working on and some of the unfortunate results of, some things that have come out of, things with the government and FDA and all that. But why is it so difficult for us? It's seemingly been easy for pharmaceutical drugs that have so effects at best and, addiction issues galore on the other side of worst. But we fight certain natural or other things that have just been taboo forever. Why in 2024 is it still seemingly so difficult to sort of get on the other side of this thing?
It's a great question. There's a lot of reasons, right?
Is it just 70-year-olds in the government that just are never going to think of certain compounds or, cannabis or MDMA as anything but, psycho hippie drugs?
Is it the boomers that are just like Nancy Reagan told us no to drugs?
Yeah.
So, and thinking about them as drugs of abuse only. That's how we were taught in medical school, right? So I think the first point is that as open-minded as so many doctors now are and healthcare providers are, we were taught in medical school, and for the most part still are across every single academic licensing healthcare institution, that all of these drugs are psychedelic drugs, cannabis, all these things are drugs of abuse. They don't teach about medical cannabis, even though we've known about it for so long. Maybe a few schools do now. But it's really, an old, mostly in the history, medical education was funded in large part by pharmaceutical companies. Yeah. And so for obvious reasons, right? That's why it's so drug focused, and there's no nutrition, right? Yeah. We get like 24 hours combined nutrition for every doctor. Every doctor has no more than 24 hours of nutrition education. It doesn't make, the only way that makes sense is if you follow the money. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Bingo.
Exactly. So we're in that system, and that system has existed for a really long time. And even though there are many, many healthcare providers who are like, I hate to use this term because it's like so overused, but basically waking up to the understanding that we could be doing things a lot better. Just thinking about that simple thing, right? We could be doing things a lot better, and probably saving a lot of money in the process, because we're getting rid of inefficiencies like all of these old systems and things that we've talked about that are like preventing cheap or free plants from patients, right? That could be healing them, instead of expensive pharmaceuticals and inpatient hospital visits and like all, stays and all of these things that cost, potentially like tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars a year per person. Right. Yeah. We could be doing this with plants that we teach people how to grow themselves. We could be doing it with
literally,
right. Plant-based extracts that are, like formulated by, actual compounding pharmacies. Like they know how to do, like, this is their job of compounding pharmacists, by the way. Most people have probably never even heard of a compounding pharmacist, but that's called a real pharmacist. And
real pharmacist.
Yes.
Those are
the guys. So the guy at CVS handed you the drive-through prepackaged pills. This Tuesday.
And they make a lot of it like right there for you, custom dosed and formulated for you and your needs, like a doctor, but for the medicines, and they do the prep. And so when you start to think about medicine from the old way, actually, like the really old way, you go back like, Hippocrates and like, Maimonides and some of the
apothecary times.
Yeah. And even into the late 19th, early 20th century, there were a lot of great critical minds that understood the philosophy of medicine and healing, and just how to think about patients first, and making sure our patients all around are taken care of, not being like given things that they shouldn't be given because it's easier or because it makes more money or whatever. Right. So like there's been a lot of infiltration of outside forces now into the system, like money and business. Like doctors see you for 5 minutes at the office because their billing codes have changed with insurance. And so if you don't want to pay cash for your doctor to see you for 30 to 40 to 45 minutes an hour, which you can get access to, every single person can. If you don't have the money to do that or don't want to do that, you have to go pay insurance or use insurance, and your insurance covers a certain amount. You pay a copay. And your doctor is paid based on the number of people that they see a day. They are not paid, for the most part, they are not paid based on the outcomes. They're not paid based on how much time they spend with you. They are paid literally based on how many people they see a day. Yeah. So how is that structure incentivizing care? It doesn't.
Incentivizes
the opposite.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's
speed
so
and
now,
treating
like,
symptoms as fast as possible. Right.
Because that's the easiest thing to make people feel better, but it's
Yeah.
not the right thing most of the time if you're not doing the other stuff, getting to the source stuff also.
Yeah.
And let's be real, nowadays, you're not even seeing an MD or a DO. You're seeing a PA or a nurse practitioner, you know?
Well, that's now you know why,
Yeah.
right? Because if doctors' time is that commoditized, right? Where they're like making doctors like factory workers, right?
That was exactly my experience with the medical lab. It's like,
right. You're just like being pushed through like they're like,
okay, these symptoms, now the iPad's going to tell me what you have and what to prescribe. Yeah. There's not a lot of free thinking. It's almost algorithmic. Everything is so systematized.
And that clicked for me early 20 years ago. And I started going to an internal doctor. I mean, I was the youngest guy ever, 20 years ago, going into an internal medicine doctor. But it clicked for me that you'd have to be looking at my blood or other things to know what's really going on. And so I'll give my doctor credit, Trey DePose here in Greenville. He's always been very care focused, and he to this day has been unique in that. And now I have some other doctors like longevity doctors, things like that. But we got to wake up and, we've been trained on this insurance thing, and I get it. It's expensive, but what is more important than our health? What are we spending money on? Because what do they say? Like, think about Steve Jobs, think about whatever. People that have all the money in the world, what would they have traded? And when I was sick a couple of weeks ago, I get sick like once every 2 years. And when you're sick, you don't want to you don't think you can't do anything else. Nothing else matters. So it's like, we got to really refocus on getting well and not just treating, symptoms of bigger issues. And I mean, that's really what we're all about here. Dr. Rabin, talk to you. I know you mentioned MDMA. I know that we just had a, kind of a step back in some of the FDA stuff. I mean, I just, again, am just floored. And look, I got 4 kids. I'm not a druggy guy, but I'm just a common sense guy. I'm like, if there's things out there that are helping where nothing else has been effective, why are we getting in the way? I don't get it. I don't understand.
So maybe for all of your listeners who are not necessarily that familiar with the impact of MDMA, I'll give you a quick recap. So the data in the last 20, 30 years for Paxil and Zoloft, which are the only two FDA approved treatments for PTSD, are having this 30% long-term response rate with so 70% of people are still sick. MDMA this is taking those medicines for life every day with side effects. Yeah. Not some of them, they're not always that bad, but side effects nonetheless. MDMA-assisted therapy, 3 doses of medicine, 42 hours of psychotherapy with 2 therapists over 12 weeks results in 70 to 88% response rates, meaning that people, the opposite number of people, almost most of the people are experiencing some response with just 3 doses of medicine. No long-lasting side effects. Any side effects that happened were light, and they just happened during the experience, and then afterwards, therapy, they were gone. No long-lasting side effects. And what's even more interesting is that in the earlier phase 2 studies, something like 55% of people who had on average 17.6 years of treatment-resistant PTSD, meaning they've tried everything and nothing's worked, 55% or so of those people were no longer meeting diagnostic criteria for PTSD 2 months after having the MDMA therapy 12-week 3-dose treatment.
How many people was the percentage?
It was a 100-person study. So it was 50.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was 55 people roughly. These people have responded to nothing. So that in and of itself is incredible. But what's even more fascinating that I think most people don't understand, and more important as a paradigm shifting tool for the field of mental health, is that MDMA at 1 year out, you follow these same people who went through time point 0, 12 weeks, then you follow them 1 year out. And that number of 55% goes up to 67% with no additional treatment. So more people are better in remission, not even meeting diagnostic criteria for PTSD anymore than they were after the treatment, because the medicine is working by helping people feel safe enough to remember and relearn how to heal themselves. And then they do after they leave.
Wow.
So that is really important as a medical phenomenon in medicine. It's not the first time that we have discovered something that has this degree of impact on quality of life and human functioning, etc. This is actually very similar to what happened when we discovered antibiotics or hand washing, right? This was like a game. These were the game-changing discoveries, both of which were not believed also when they were first discovered. So we have a lot of lessons we haven't learned from. But these were two of the most important single discoveries of medicine in the last 150 years: hand washing and bread mold and its ability to kill bacteria, right? Extremely simple, elegant solutions to problems that were killing 20% of people.
Wow.
Right. So now, and at that time and I'll give you like a really, really quick, can I give you a really quick mini history lesson?
Please.
Oh, yes.
So I love the history of medicine because it's fascinating, and we always just keep making the same damn mistakes, and we claim to be so smart. We don't even learn from our own mistakes.
Yes.
So that's like I love like studying this because I think it helps us to like, do it right this time. But basically, if you look at antibiotics, like antibiotics were up until that point in like 1920 something, when Alexander Fleming synthesized penicillin for the first time in doses high enough to actually kill bacteria, and repeatedly so. Before that, and for about 10 years after, infection was considered to be a illness that would kill you or result in potentially losing a limb almost every time, or a piece of your body, or having some long-term terminal illness. Like it was lifelong. Getting an infection would often result in death or a lifelong illness, or many. And that was one of the major common causes of death in people. And it shortened lifespan dramatically. And then Alexander Fleming discovers and synthesizes penicillin from bread mold. And all of a sudden, what unfolds over the course of the next 15 to 20 years without any clinical trials, just testing it on people, because that's what we did back then in science and medicine. We were able to develop and commercialize all of the treatments for all infection worldwide. For the most part, there are still some things that elude us, but for the most part, we've got like 99% of the world's infectious diseases that have tried to kill us human beings. We've pretty much figured out treatments for most of them because of that single discovery.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, infection became something that you can treat within 1 to 12 weeks. And people who had what was perceived as a terminal illness became people who had now long, beautiful lives, right? Thanks to this discovery. And so MDMA-assisted therapy is akin to what antibiotics do for infection for PTSD and mental health. Like what the science shows from the studies that have been done to date, which are much more significant than was done with hand washing, with antibiotics, with many other drugs, show in double-blind randomized placebo-controlled trials that MDMA-assisted therapy is not just significantly and safely improving people's symptoms with PTSD who have never been able to get better, but it's doing so in a sustained way with just 3 doses of medicine and 42 hours of psychotherapy with 2 therapists. Maybe it costs $10,000 to $14,000 to deliver, but so does 1 inpatient hospitalization for a patient, right?
True.
1 inpatient hospitalization could be the cost of an entire MDMA-assisted therapy session, and that has more side effects to people than MDMA-assisted therapy. So the fact that the FDA, which you alluded to earlier, on August 9th, denied FDA clearance with bright shining stars and rainbows to the MAPS Lykos MDMA-assisted therapy protocol, which has been in the works for 40 years to help people with PTSD, is astonishing. It is astonishing. It is like burning Galileo at the stake astonishing, because of how many veterans and people had this treatment as a hope that ultimately took their lives just based on finding that out. Right? Like, we know this is happening. We know veterans have over 2 times the suicide rate of the average American. And for what? Serving America? What are we doing for these people that makes any sense? Right? Yeah. Like, we can fix this problem. Again, that's just like my thesis, but I'm beating a dead horse. These are problems we can fix, right? It's not that complicated. MDMA-assisted therapy activates molecular safety pathways in the brain that help us to feel safe enough to remake meaning around past trauma. That helps us to teach ourselves to lift the weight of past trauma off of our shoulders and live present and free of it, but with the lessons of it. It's the best possible outcome for humans that tribes people have been using for healing for thousands of years with and without plant medicine. So like, we have access to these tools, right? Apollo is one example of the tools that people can use to help feel safe in their own bodies again, right? But these tools just need to be like disseminated, and like, we need support from the government, from the medical community at large. And we're working on it. We have the Board of Medicine medical board that's helping to do this and publish papers on how to use cannabis for treating opioid use disorder, right? This has never been taught. People are dying of opiates every day. We have cannabis. It works. We know it works. Why is it not being taught? So we just wrote it up. We reviewed the science. We published the guidelines, and we're teaching it, right? We're just doing it. So like, that is starting to happen, and the change will come.
Why did the FDA turn it down?
So that's also a really good question. So I don't think they're getting paid. I don't think the FDA got paid off in any way to turn this down.
And the one thing I read one article that they felt, where some of the respondents in one of the studies, maybe it was the one you referenced, said they felt pressured to say it helped more than it did or something. That was the one, and I don't know if that was,
there's no evidence of that.
Yeah.
That was basically made up. It felt
made up because they didn't have anybody that was quoted or anything. It was just like, okay.
Yeah. They're just like, let's make this reason and put out in the news.
Yeah. So if you want to get real right now and understand like how crazy the world is, like, this is also really unprecedented, at least from my understanding of the history of medicine and the development of like drug treatments to help people. So basically, this group, there's a group of people who, many of whom used to work for MAPS in the past, when MAPS was just a nonprofit. But MAPS raised like $160 million or more as a nonprofit with philanthropic donations to take MDMA to the FDA's desk.
Dr. Rabin, can you just explain MAPS real quick for anyone listening?
So MAPS is the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. Now they have a for-profit arm called Lykos, and they have been working for 40 years to prove that MDMA-assisted therapy works safely to treat PTSD. It's led by originally Rick Doblin, and they're the only nonprofit pharmaceutical company that's focused on like common good treatments that are like not focused on making a return. They're all focused on just getting these successful psychedelic treatments out to the world of people who are suffering. So sorry, go ahead.
You were saying MAPS and the FDA. I interrupted.
Yeah, so MAPS and the FDA have been working together since 2008 to basically have so that MAPS could design trials that would be approved, right? Like, all of this was set up very strategically to succeed. And I think all the evidence suggests that it would have. Things would have been different if not for a group of people that goes by under the the title Symposia with a P, that many of whom used to work at MAPS left MAPS seemingly because they were upset about the nonprofit starting to having to work and endorse for-profit organizations. Mm. And these people really seem to hate for-profit organizations, and they hate pharma companies. And so as MAPS was required, because that's what's required if you've ever run a business, you cannot, like, it's impossible to run a nonprofit pharma company beyond really where MAPS has taken it. They've done everything they can, but the problem is you need to raise money. And these projects take hundreds of millions of dollars, and people don't want to just donate to a nonprofit without any ROI. Like, that is the fact that MAPS raised 160 million or whatever. It took them 38 years, right? 38 years to raise that kind of money to get MDMA where it is. If this was being done by a pharma company, $1 billion pharma company, it would be done in 1 to 2 years. No problem, right? But because it was done nonprofit, because there were no pharma companies that would take it because it's off patent at that time. And, Rick really wanted to make this a treatment for the people. They focus on being nonprofit. And so ultimately, as they became more for-profit, the anti-capitalist people who were working with MAPS, the anti-government, anti-for-profit big pharma people left. And they started this group called Symposia. And Symposia calls them the Psychedelic Watchdog Organization. And what they do effectively, and this is not my speculation or opinion. What I tell you is what I've read on the internet that mostly is from what they have posted themselves, is that they took it upon themselves because they were angry with MAPS, and that calling MAPS a therapy cult, which is totally ludicrous. They're a research and clinical trials organization. Yeah, they love therapy, and yeah, they love healing people. They're fucking passionate people, but they're not a therapy cult, right? And so they wrote these aggressive and falsified letters to the FDA and to the FDA advisory committee, and rallied people who were skeptical and didn't know, who were afraid, and rallied people around these falsified information about the dangers of MDMA being more dangerous than MAPS was conveying. And this was, in fact, not at all true. Like, the evidence shows that MDMA is safe. However, we must remember that the FDA, regardless of how long, remember we were talking about earlier about how money incentivizes decision-making in government and medical practice and all these things. So in the FDA, as a government organization, money and their reputation, money doesn't really matter so much, right? This is about keeping your job and not getting in trouble. Mm. And so they are inherently, as a government organization, risk averse.
Sure.
So as soon as any small group of people started challenging the idea that MDMA was safe, which had been now proven by science and proven in all these different areas, as soon as there was like any kind of uproar in the community that was started by these folks, who are also, by the way, equate veterans with white supremacists and are anti-veteran. And they believe that veterans, because they've worked they've perhaps served in war, that they know their political beliefs and they don't deserve the right to heal. Right? Like, this is absurd. Going back to like the original principles of medicine. None of these people are doctors or researchers or actually work in the space. They're just people who want to share their opinion, which is great. Go for it. Share your opinion. But don't like fuck up 40 years of real people's hard work that was like allowing the antibiotics for mental health to be delivered to the community finally. After 40 years, you're going to fuck that up as you're like, I'm coming in as a hero, right? Like,
but only for these groups of people, not for these ones.
I just don't understand what they think. What are they gaining if they were on the MAPS camp and trying to help get MDMA forward and over the hump? What would be their motivation to set it back 10 years?
Ego,
I don't know, man. Vengeance, right? Like getting back at them. You know, by saying like, hey, this isn't safe, but like now we get as much MDMA as we want on the street, so we don't need you anymore. Right. Like, that's like the only thing that I can think of, because the tone of all of these folks who are writing to the FDA and publishing their open letters and going on Twitter and at TED and saying publicly how proud they are that they did this, right? They're saying how proud publicly that they are, that they prevented this incredible treatment from getting to all of our patients and friends and family, right? Like, what is going on in America that is okay? And not that they don't have the freedom of speech to say what they want. They can say what they want. But the fact that the FDA advisory committee that first read those letters and voted on June 9th, that you probably heard about, was the first disruption, and then informed the FDA and that the FDA that actually reviewed this did not clearly go and do a thorough review of the data and compare to what our current treatments are doing. Because if they had done that simple comparison I provided to you earlier, it would take a 5-year-old to know that you choose the one that actually works, not the one that doesn't, right? And it's safe. So like, we know that if you actually review the study data, you know that it's safe. And it's been studied in other studies shown to be safe. So like, the fact that they focused on safety as the issue and all of this, which was the exact language of the people from the Symposia group, they basically just took what they said and were like, meh, this looks scary, scarier than we thought. Yeah, scarier than we thought. All right, let's delay it, make them do more studies.
Crazy.
And that's what happens, right? And that was a strategy that they used to disrupt this for their own, whatever their own personal gains are, I don't know, but they all, they are part of, like, the underground is going to thrive now, which are people getting psychedelic care from untrained providers, because now there's no trained providers who can do it legally. So thanks for that.
Jeez.
It's crazy. You're right. Because even the veteran thing pisses me off, because even those guys, I'm empathetic, because I'm like, you were sold a lie. Your intentions were good. You wanted to do right by your country. But a lot of those guys I talk to, now that they realize these wars and what's really going on, I almost feel like they're the most in need of help. It's like they got played, they sacrificed their life, and now they're coming back and getting treated like shit. I mean, mostly the VA is horrible. Like you said, the meds. It's really mind-blowing that there'd be a group that would try to just block that. And correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Rabin, MDMA was synthesized, in the 60s and 70s? Wasn't used for marriage counseling originally? Was that? I've seen a documentary.
MDMA was actually first synthesized by a Merck chemist named Anton Kolsch in 1913 or something like that.
Oh,
wow. And nobody really thoroughly tested it until Sasha Shulgin resynthesized it. Another industry chemist who synthesized it in the 1970s, I believe. And then they started testing it and seeing that when you hit the right dose of MDMA, you get these powerful transformative experiences of like self-love and connection and radical self-acceptance and non-judgment and safety and all these things. So like, to call it not safe is like really quite silly. When the whole basis of how it works is it's activating molecular safety. Like, that's what it does. So like, let's stop bullshitting, guys. Like, let's get the treatment out there.
Yeah.
Well, we know there's one treatment that's available now, and it's Apollo Neuro.
I mean, it's based on the understanding of MDMA therapy, right? So the idea was for us to use the understanding that MDMA, which is from a lot of my research into this on the epigenetic level of our stress response genes and on our like felt safety level, safety is the most important thing. And if we feel safe in our bodies, then our bodies turn off our stress response system, which then we send blood and resources to our recovery response system, which is like digestion, immunity, reproduction, empathy, creativity, all the sleep, recovery, all of those things require our bodies to feel safe because we're more vulnerable when we're in a relaxed state. So, I mean, there's only so much resources to go around. So like, we want as much blood flow as possible going to the parts of the body that we're using at any given time. That kind of makes sense, right?
Yep.
So this is the autonomic nervous system, which is the parasympathetic rest and recovery vagal system, and the sympathetic fight or flight system. These two systems govern, more importantly than anything else, resource allocation of blood throughout the body at any given moment. And by doing things like changing your breath or squatting or exercising or, meditating, you can change blood flow patterns in your body effectively, which is, and so the more that we do things like feel safe, which activates the vagus nerve and the recovery response system, the more we heal, because we're delivering blood flow to the organ systems and the parts of our body that are important for healing. And Apollo was a technology we developed out of the understanding of how this nervous system works, and that soothing touch, like the touch we all have received from our mothers when we're newborns, right? Nonverbal, instantaneous safety. If you've had kids, right, you hold your crying kids, it like can immediately calm them down. And that's because touch is so powerful at activating that safety response system in the brain. And so we figured out that if MDMA activates the system and soothing touch does it, and soothing music does it, and holding pets can do it, then maybe we can like replicate that effect with technology. And so
I think you've done it, because I've never thought of it in the way you've described it, and feeling safe. I mean, I've read it in your guys' website, but that's exactly what it does. And I've literally watched it on my friends when I put it on them, like the calm setting.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it mimics, is that mother's touch, or like a hug from a close friend, where you have that guard comes down and you feel that safety and that relief. Wow.
Yeah.
Dr. Rabin, where can everybody keep up with everything you're doing and the product there? Chris shows it. He's got it in his waistband there. Where can they keep up with everything you've got going on, Dr. Rabin?
Well, I love to hear from people on socials. So come follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Dr. David Rabin. And if you are interested in deeper dive into my work, you can go to my personal website, which is also my clinic website. I'm a practicing psychiatrist. I do teach people how to provide care to people, and provide care to people who are in need, because it's very, very tough out there in mental health right now for many people. So you can find that at drdave.io or apollo.clinic, and Apollo Neuroscience, or wearablehugs.com if you want to find out more about Apollo. And then if you want to learn more about psychedelics, check me out at the Psychedelic Report on Spotify and Apple Podcast.
Awesome. We really appreciate it, Dr. Rabin, and really admire everything you're doing and the work you've done with Apollo.
Thank you. Really appreciate you having me.
Hey guys, you know where to find us, vibescience.media. You'll find all the full episodes, the highlight clips, and links to Dr. Dave's, all of his websites, information, and of course the links to Apollo Neuro. It's an amazing product. Chris has vouched for it for 3 years. I'll vouch for it now. And look, keep your mind open and your vibes high. We'll see you next time on Vibe Science.
The content discussed on this show is provided for reference and educational purposes. The content is not an attempt to practice medicine or provide specific medical advice. Always consult your personal physician for medical advice and proper diagnosis.
Thanks for listening. This is Vibe Science. To learn more or watch full episodes, visit vibesciencepodcast.com. Here's to discovering your highest vibe.